Yo, what's going on, everybody? My name is Panic Mode. Welcome back to another video. It's been a really long time since I have done a tutorial video. I feel really bad about it because I should have done another one when I got my laptop, but I didn't. I neglected to. And also, to be serious, school has been kind of rough on me lately. I have been learning a lot about music production, but I have a lot of homework from that course to do. But now that I'm actually home for the weekend and I'm done a lot of my homework, I can make another tutorial video, and I thought today it'd be nice for me to show you how I made this dubstep drop. You probably saw this in another video on my channel. I posted it the other day. I've actually been working on it more, and I think it's a lot better. I've extended it to a full 32 bar drop, so it's pretty awesome. I'm going to play it from start. Here we go. So yeah, that is the entire drop. Obviously, there's going to be an intro and breakdown. I'm going to create a second drop. I have no idea what my biggest plan for this track is, but hopefully this is going to end up being a full track by the time it's done. I'm really excited to finish it off. So first things first, let's start with the drums. Honestly, the drums are not complicated at all, and you can probably see this. There's like 4 channels active. No, more like 6 channels active, or 5 channels active. There's about 5 channels active during the drop, and all it really is we got this kick snare pattern, and we got these 2 cymbal loops. They're more rhythmy style cymbals, but I just use them for dubstep because they still work fine. And then we just got some crashes and some tom fills. And obviously, you know that this is a virtual riot sample. I know, I love virtual riot samples. They're really useful for dubstep. In terms of the samples for the drums, I'm going to go over the actual structure of these drums here because I think that it's very important how I go over the mixing that I did with these drums. First of all, you probably noticed that these are not all virtual riot samples. I mean, I do have these 2, and I do have this one, but I haven't used this for anything yet. But these 2, the main kick and snare, are actually Vengeance samples. And I got these from a Vengeance sample pack called Vengeance Dubstep Essentials Volume 3. It's a very, very good pack that I really recommend people who have the money to buy it, because I always have a hard time trying to find really good dubstep samples for this style of dubstep, like, you know, the virtual riot, barely live kind of stuff. I find that, okay, yeah, sure, we could use virtual riot's heavy bass design sample pack, but I find that those drums are very overused and not necessarily 100% what I would want for drums. This pack, the Vengeance Essential Dubstep Volume 3 pack, gives you all you need. And there are a lot of amazing kick drums in here. There's actually a 200. There's 200 kick samples. And there is more than 200 snare samples. I didn't actually know that. 250 snare samples. So, like, that's a lot of stuff, and it's about $74 American, I think so, but I'm Canadian, so I had to pay a bit extra. But if you have the money, if you can afford it, definitely buy this sample pack. Amazing, amazing, amazing. There's so much you can do with it, and it's a great way to get inspiration as well, because there's a ton of really cool melody loops that you can check out as well. But I'm not affiliated with these guys. I'm not here to advertise their pack. I'm just suggesting it if you need some good dubstep samples. So let's go over the mixing of the drums. First things first, we got this standard kick right here. This is a nice punchy kick that I just mixed pretty. I think I did a good job mixing it. What we got here is we got a glue compressor. Really, all this glue compressor is doing, it's just kind of nailing the tail of the kick so it makes more room for the transient. If you listen without it, it sounds fine, but I find that the sub is a bit too much. So with the glue compressor, with the attack all the way up and the release all the way down, it just tightens it up a bit, and it creates more room for the other sub elements to go through. Then we got this little compressor here. It's actually not really compressing anything. It's actually on expanded mode, and that's just making the kick louder. I mean, you obviously don't need to do this. You could just raise the level of it, but I found this technique somewhere, and I thought maybe it added. I felt it added a bit more volume to the kick. Now onto the EQ. This may look a bit confusing to beginners, but I'll go and explain a bit of it. The first thing I did here is I added a frequency shifter, and a lot of people really overlook the point of this frequency shifter here in Ableton Live. What I'm doing with this frequency shifter is I'm actually changing the key of the kick. I'm actually tuning the kick, and this is very, very important in EDM. A lot of amateur producers overestimate this because they don't really think tuning of the kick matters. Well, let me go and explain this for a little bit. If you have a kick that's in the key of, let's say this track is in the key of F minor. If your kick sub is in the key of F, is in the key of F sharp or G, if you blend a sub in the key of F with a kick that has a sub in the key of F sharp, it's going to create this really weird effect, and it's going to make your mix sound terrible. Even if it's sidechain, you're still going to have a little bit of that like greasiness in the sub that you're not going to want at all. So that's why I just add this frequency shifter, so because look, if you look without it, as you can see, the sub is around the key of F now, right? If I didn't have the frequency shifter, the sub is up here, and that's G sharp. I don't want it G sharp. The song is in the key of F, so I just put the frequency shifter down and bring it till it's around here. Now, in terms of actual equalization, I got this little peak here just to boost the sub a little bit because I didn't think it was boosted enough. And then I just have this little dip here to get rid of the boxy frequencies. And this little shelf here is just to get rid of the high frequencies so I can make room for the snare. Now, if you are wondering what this is called a side EQ, and this is basically just a way you can EQ all the stereo frequencies on a specific sound. If you want to be able to switch to a side EQ, by default, your equalizer should be set to stereo. That affects both the mid and side EQs. If you want to affect both individually, you click on this M/S, and this is mid and side EQ, and you can just switch between the two of them. Because as you can see, if I have, and the whole point of this is that we want to have a mono sub. Any mixdown, any EDM mixdown needs to have a mono sub. If you do not have a mono sub, you probably will not have a clean sounding mix. And as you can see, if I drag this side EQ down a bit, you can see that there is some stereo sub frequencies, and we really don't want that. It might not sound very noticeable. It makes your mix sound bad in mono because you really don't want any mono stereo. You really just want your sub frequencies to be mono. So I just drag this up. Really, you're gonna want your entire kick to be mono, but I found that if it was entirely mono, it just didn't have a lot of the punch, or not necessarily a lot of the punch, but you couldn't really hear the sizzle that well. So I just left a little bit of stereo frequencies up. Really, it should have been more. It would be more ideal if I just kind of just lowered it so the stereo side frequencies could boost up more. So let's move on to the snare. The snare is pretty nice. And you probably noticed one thing is that it doesn't have the transient. And the reason why I didn't include the transient is because it's being layered with the kick, if you haven't noticed. It's being layered with the kick drum. And I layer it with the kick drum just because it adds more punch to the snare. Without it, if you listen, like, that's really weak in my opinion. So I just layered the kick on top of it just to give it some more punch. And obviously, I EQ'd it out a bit. Again, I tuned the snare. Now, with snare drums, you don't necessarily need to tune them that much. Like, if you have if you're using like a clap sample, claps don't necessarily need to be tuned as much as snares or kicks do. As you can see in like any snare, and a dubstep snare specifically, there's a resonating frequency, and this is exactly where I want it to be. This is exactly where I want it to be. So it's at F. If I take off the frequency shifter, it's actually at A, and that's not the key of the track. Is it A minor? No, it's F. So I put the frequency shifter on, and I lowered it. So now it's at the key of F. Again, with snares, it's not as important, but maybe you should tune it just in case the genre you're doing has snares that are really resonating like this. So next up, let's go on to the cymbals. So these are very standard cymbals. Now, these aren't necessarily made by me. I got these from a friend. Please don't beg me for the samples in the comments, because samples like these, they didn't really come from a pack. I found them on a Discord server, and a friend of mine just gave them to me, and I really like them. I use these all the time. So, but I can't explain what's going on here if you have drum samples that are like this. As you can see, there's two different ones, but they both relatively sound the same way. If I just solo one at a time. As you can see, that one sounds... They both sound pretty similar. So what I did was I layered the both of them, panned 1 10 to the left and 1 10 to the right. And that really just creates a nice stereo effect, so they're not placed in the middle, because the middle of the mix is exactly where you want your kick and your snare, especially in dubstep. So these are layered on top of each other, and they're panned, so they're just, on the side of the mix. So then we just got this crash cymbal, and all this is just it's just your regular crash cymbal, and it's got this Haas filter on it. And for those of you that don't know what a Haas filter is, it's basically just a simple delay with one side delayed by 20 milliseconds. It just creates this nice stereo effect for the sound you put it on, and as you can see without it, it sounds in the middle, and I didn't really like that. I wanted it to feel more on the side, so I just put it on there. And if you're wearing headphones, you'll probably be able to hear that. So lastly, the last thing we have here is just this tom fill. Nothing special here. I didn't pan it or anything fancy mixing. I didn't do any fancy mixing with it. It's just your standard tom fill. So another thing you'll notice is that I have this drums sidechain group here. And really what this is this is just sidechaining the cymbals and the crash only. And that's just to make some room for the kick and the snare. You could send it to your main sidechain channel, but I chose to make one specifically inside the drums group, just so I can still send these cymbals to the whole drum group, so I can process them all together. And I just process them with this glue compressor preset that I got from a Cymatics project, and it's just like a parallel drum compression. It adds a lot of punch to the drums, if you haven't noticed. So yeah, so we're gonna go on to the synths and the samples next. We're not really gonna go on to the basses just yet. I'm gonna leave that to the end, but let's go on to the synths. So the synths are also nothing very complex. This is just like the standard stuff you'd hear in any dubstep track. So really what's going on here, we just got this brass sample here, and it's just layered with a string. Without the string, it sounds really weak. So I just added the string sample at the bottom to give it more power, give it more dynamic low end. And it's just basically a hit for every 2 bars. And it just adds that impact. You don't necessarily need to use horns if you don't want to. A lot of people like to use super saw stabs, but I find that's pretty overused. But, it's up to your taste. The only other 2 things I got in the synth group right here is just this ARP and these chord stabs. So these are just simple serum patches. There's really nothing special to them. You can make these in less than like a minute. So really all we got is just a saw wave and a square wave, 1 octave up. And then they're just like low pass to create that little plucky effect. And we just got a downsample distortion on it to give it that like crispy high end. and then just some room, just some dimension to give it some room, compression, delay, and reverb. And one thing I should mention that I have is that I have this envelope, this standard envelope, set on the mix of the delay and reverb. And what this is basically doing is that when I play a note and hold it, the delay and reverb are active, but when I let go, the delay and reverb go away. So that just makes it so the delay and reverb won't bleed between each note, which is really helpful, especially for mix downs, so you don't really have a muddy mix. So same thing with the chord stabs. Really nothing special going on here. All we got is just, you know, it looks like your standard super saw, but we got just low pass filter on here. Give it like this nice plucky effect. And then we just got multi-band compressor and reverb. Nothing else really special on that. Let me just freeze that one more time. So now let's just head on to the effects samples. There's not really a lot I need to go into depth here because a lot of this is very self-explanatory. Like this is just like an offbeat chant and a down lifter, and then we just got your uplifters here that, you know, go into like a nice fill. Yeah. This sample right here was actually a serum preset that I got from a friend. Please don't ask me for it. I'm not going to give it to you. I just want to go over quickly what these are. These are just like background layers just to give like, these are just to make the drop feel more full in the stereo mix. Now I actually made this sample myself. But this is just like literally a crowd sample, and as you can see, yes, this is going to be released in a sample pack someday. I'm working on it. And then I just made this. This is just kind of like a police siren kind of thingy. And both of these are panned, not really panned, but they oh, I actually thought I had some Haas filter. I actually thought I had a Haas filter in it. Well, you should be putting some stereo wideners on top of your background effects like these, which I just did with this one to make it feel more on the side of the mix instead of the center, because the center is again meant for, actually I didn't need to for this one because they were already, the mix on this was already stereoized, so I didn't need to put them on the stereo image for this. So finally, let's go on to the basses. So I did freeze every single one of these bass tracks because I really just, like, it was killing my computer. Even though I have a pretty good computer, these were overloading it, and I was overestimating the power of my computer. Now I'm not gonna go over every single one of these presets, but I will go over some of the main ones. As you can see, we got your basic bass hit. If we just play this, this is soloed. As you can see, we just got this basic bass hit. And I'll just look through the preset with you guys. This wavetable comes with serum, so if you have it, you can make this exact patch. There's not a lot, there's nothing really too advanced going on here. We just got some bend minus, which is a very common warping method in dubstep basses. We just got some bend minus. Wavetable positions a bit just modulated a bit, and then we got a high notch filter. I love using the high notch filter instead of the high pass peak filter, because the high notch filter just creates more valuiness, and that's what I like about it. The high peak filter is not as good because it just kind of creates more annoying frequencies, in my opinion. The high notch filter is a lot better because it creates a notch and it just gives it more valuiness, which is very essential in dubstep basses, especially for this kind of style. In terms of effects, we don't really have that much else. We got a tube distortion, a flanger, hyper dimension. Actually, we have no dimension. We just got a little bit of hyper just to give it a nice, like, rich texture. And then we just got like a low pass, and that's really just to get rid of the nasty high frequencies that might be resonating as the sound goes on. Then we just got like a bit of comms filter. This actually is not really doing much because the mix is down really low. I don't know why I put this here. I guess I was experimenting with something and, you know, forgot to disable it when I realized it wasn't really doing anything. And then we just got a multi-band compressor. Now this actually I don't need this, and I'll explain why. in terms of post-processing, we just got like a phaser. This is just to create more valleyiness. And then after that, I have this thing called a fat rack, and everybody who creates dubstep should use a fat rack, because fat racks really create power and saturation in the sound. As you can see, if I play this sound now, that sounds amazing. But without the fat rack, that sounds really boring, right? The fat rack gives you everything you ever wanted. And there's a lot going on here. I'll just briefly explain some of this. First things first, we just got a utility here to set the input gain, because without it, it kind of oversaturates a bit too much. Maybe not for your taste, but it does for my taste. Then we just got this Fletcher Munson EQ, just so you can get rid of all the very resonating frequencies. Then we just got a saturator, giving it some distortion. This fat saturator that I made, this is a preset I made for the saturator plugin inside of Ableton. Little radiator, give it more saturation. I have this chorus effect I'm not actually using. Then I have another phaser just to give it some more body. An overdrive distortion plugin to boost up some of the high-end distortion. We got a reduce ambience filter just to get rid of some resonating frequencies that might be coming after all this. Got a sausage fattener. Obviously, everybody uses this plugin. Got an OTT, and an input, another utility just to boost up the rest of the frequencies. And last but not least, we got a serum effects, just giving it some dimension, which gives it some more stereo width. As you can see, without it, it doesn't really sound too great. Afterwards, we got an EQ, getting rid of all the muddy frequencies and the really annoying frequencies. And then last but not least, we got this little, that just makes the sound overall a lot louder. We don't really need these auto filters here. This was actually just a preset that I didn't really make this preset myself, but yeah, you get the point. Now I cut out the low end. A lot of people I see who make dubstep basses like to make the sub bass inside of the serum patch using the sub oscillator right here. And that's not necessarily a terrible idea. You can still do a good job with it. I know Virtual Riot does it, and his tracks are amazing. But I find that the sub can get a lot cleaner and a lot more powerful if you just make it as a separate patch. And that's what I did here. I cut out the low end here just so I was able to make room for the sub. We listen to the sub here. It has everything we need. I'll just go over the processing for the sub. There's not a whole lot. This is very, very simple stuff. So let me just go over it really quick. So we just got a basic sine wave right in here. Nothing else going on inside of the effects chain or anything. We do have some pitch modulation, but that's just for the basses that have pitch modulation as well. We got a warm-up lows saturator preset. Very good for subs. And then we just got a limiter to boost the shit out of it so it sounds powerful. Because as you can see, it sounds like garbage here. And this is just like a little technique I like to use, because with subs, they get a lot more powerful when you boost the shit out of them and then lower the mix on them. So just like put a limiter on it and put the ceiling at 0 dB and then just boost the gain as shit. And then when it starts to distort, pull it back a bit, and then you'll have a nice volume for your sub. So I think that's perfect. And then we just have this EQ8 getting all the clickiness away from the sub, because with it you might not notice it with as you can see, there's clicky frequencies, so I just cut them out with the EQ8 right in here, and that just creates the perfect sub. So yeah, we'll just briefly go over the rest of the with the rest of the basses, and then we'll finish the video. So right in here we got a this is my favorite growl. And what I did was I just kind of duplicated this bass and created variations of it. So like this. Well, actually, this isn't really a variation. This is just a growl I used to fill the end. But this is a variation. I think this is a variation too. That's not really. What is it? One variation? Yeah. And that one's just a bit more squarey. I like this version of it a lot. And yeah, the main phrase of the song is literally just built upon that first patch I made, and I just kind of edited it over time. And that's the thing with dubstep, is that you just kind of have to like duplicate the sounds you're happy with and then tweak them in ways that make them unique but still give you that flow of creativity. I'll just go over the patch for this first one real quick because I'm sure you guys want to see what it is. Again, this is just a monster wavetable, which is another free wavetable you can get inside of Serum. These are really good wavetables. These monster wavetables are underspectral. Do not underestimate these wavetables. They can create some pretty dope sounds. There's not really much going on in here. Actually, I have a very minimal amount of effects inside of the effects chain. Literally just some distortion, some hyper, some more high notch EQing, and a compressor. Really not a lot going on in here. 2 of these we don't even need, to be honest. But that's just up to me because, you know, sometimes I like to have another high pass filter up in the effects section just to give it more valiness, because I don't really feel it will have a lot if I just use a standard filter. And yeah, that's basically it. So before I end the video, I'm just going to explain what I did with the structuring of the drop, because this is, in my opinion, pretty important, especially when we have people trying to create their own dubstep drops. I like to split every 2 bars into different sections, and then I'll repeat the sections if I really want to. As you can see, in the first 16 bars, we got some nice variation going, and it really helps when I start a drop, when I divide each segment into A, B, A, C parts, so I can just kind of know where I need to change things up. So as you can see, I have this basic drop A part, and then I have the B part. Actually, why is that muted? That should not be muted. And then we just have the A part repeated, and then the C part is repeated as well. And then the C part is made, and that just kind of ends the phrase. Also, a lot of you guys are probably going to ask where I got this vocal sample from. I made this myself. This is me, it's not somebody else. Drop it like a motherfucker. It does sound kind of weird because I added some swing to it just so it fit with the triplet motion of the track. And that was just done in the groove. The original one actually sounds like this. Drop it like a motherfucker. And yeah, I made those myself. That's me saying drop it like a motherfucker. I really love that sample. But yeah, don't ask me where I got it because it's mine, and I'm not going to give it to anybody just yet. I will eventually, but not right now. And so anyway, back to the structure of the track. After the first 8 bars, I have another 8-bar section, and this is just kind of expanding on the first part. So I just kind of create a variation for A and call it D. I create a variation for B, call it E, and then I repeat D, and then I just add a new one. This says C1, but it's not necessarily C1. It's just kind of like the beginning of the fill. It's just kind of like the beginning of the fill. So really not much else here. And then the drop repeats, and I just kind of separated these sections into A2, B2, A2, C1, because the C part actually repeats itself. This is actually more of a variation on C1, so I could rename this to C2, which I probably should. And then, yeah, everything's just an expansion on that. One thing I find that helps when I'm trying to make a dubstep drop is I lay out the sub first, and I imagine the rhythm in my head. Because if I just, like, go right ahead and, like, go with the flow, it doesn't really end up the way I would want it to end up. So as you can see, I made this sub patch before I started with any of the basses, and then I worked around that patch, and I created all the basses. So yeah, that's basically the whole drop. I'm going to go over the build up in a different video because I don't have a whole lot of time, but I hope you guys learned something, and if you did, please let me know and what you would like to see in future tutorials. I know this wasn't the best. This is actually a new format that I'm trying out for my tutorial videos, so I might feel a bit clumsy on the first few times I do this format. But other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed and learned something, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.